in the house here today on the drawing board, taking advantage, just enjoying this great weather that we finally got here in Michigan. Looks like a lot of parts of the country are actually getting some of that, great snow to add to this late season experience, if you will. Today, guys, what we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about just that. We're going to talk about three late season strategies, three late season plans that revolve around food plots and what not to do. So three late season food plot do nots. Up until now, you won't see me promoting hunting those food plots at all over those food plots. Obviously, you got to have that plot. You got to have those destination feed locations. You got to know if you're hunting on public ground where that food source is. Is that food source changing out on public ground? What is the draw on the area that you're hunting? It doesn't matter where you are across the country. Food has to be a well-known factor in your arsenal, and you have to have that piece of the puzzle. You have to know where bedding. You have to know where that feed is, and that's the reason here is this, guys, is because that in this part of the country, when the elements get to where they are now, it's a powerful time of the year. These last 2 weeks of the season are extremely powerful. But what happens is that's when the box blind, the ground blind, I'm a ground blind hunter myself, that's where I was last night. But they start focusing because it's a comfort thing. To me, that's great, just as my blind was last night. Don't get me wrong, when it was raining, sleeting, hailing, just a nasty mess last night there at the end before dark, I was glad to be in that ground blind. But you have to be able to know when is a comfort versus a productivity, and why you're in that stand. So the connection is there. A lot of those box blinds, a lot of those ground blinds are on the edge of food plots. Why? Because they're gun hunted out of. They're in a spot where you can see a long ways, and that focuses the attention. So you tie the dots together here. You tie food plots, you tie blinds, you tie comfort, and that's what happens is it's easy to hunt in the mornings. So the point here is do not hunt AMs and AMs and PMs back to back to back. If you dial back into the rut in the pre-season, you'll hear me focus on staying on the outside, not going inside of those bedding areas, and then all of a sudden it's that week of the time to crash in those right spots, make it happen, and then you'll see me recommending getting back out of there. And now we're in that same period. Same focus as guys, as there is browse is powerful in bedding areas, but food sources right now, evening food sources are where your ticket is, and if you burn that last ticket, it will totally devastate your late season productivity, or your late season availability to be able to punch that tag. So just because it's comfortable, still don't hunt morning, night, morning, night, morning, night. And we're going to talk about what I recommend doing to get to that get to that success. But that's taking that out of there, not a back-to-back morning, evening, morning, evening, morning, evening for 2 weeks straight here. If you do have the opportunity, or if you just hunt the weekends when you're off from work, and you hunt morning and night, whether whether that stand should be hunted or not, you want to get as most hours in as possible, and you only have that one stand. And to me, that's where I see a lot of hard-earned hours in a stand get cut short because of this approach right here. Number two thing that we're going to talk about is adding to a failed food plot. Well, this time of the year, you wouldn't think that there's a saving grace for a failed food plot. Your food plot now has shown its cards. If your food plot was going to work, it worked 30 days ago. Is there a way though to add to that to fix a failed plot? Obviously, you can't plant seed. You can't plant. Right now, you're not going to get anything to grow, anything like that. Some of your rye is laying dormant underneath your snow load on your plots and stuff. They'll dig through that. They're finding it, but it's not going to. You can't add any of that seed or anything like that to save it. What you can do in areas, in states that this is legal, a couple of states that come to mind: Ohio. Iowa, you can feed. You can't hunt over it in Iowa, but you can enhance your feed. Kentucky, Kansas, Arkansas those are just to name a few that can take advantage of this that a lot of states can't. And here in Michigan, we cannot. Minnesota, Wisconsin, these are states that you would think that you could because of the aid of the health of the deer going into the herd, but we're just the opposite. We aren't allowed to bait because there's so much that tells you the emphasis that's put on food sources. We aren't allowed to add any sugar beets or corn or anything like that out there to draw in deer in the late season. In areas of the upper peninsula of Michigan, yes, you are able to do that, but what happens up there is folks are putting that, instead of in that food plot area, they're putting it in front of the blinds. Now you're creating that end point, that destination feed location at your blind, and that what that does is that's just pushing, and we've talked about this before, but you're just pushing that your movement to that end goal or that end location. You're just pushing it further and further back into your property, hopefully internal. Most of the times it's not. You're pushing that, especially on small parcels, you're pushing that daylight movement onto someone else's parcel. You're pushing that out on state ground. You're pushing that off from your area, and that allows somebody else to come in and hunt those deer going to and from your location, especially when you're sitting on it and you're blowing those deer off from it in the evening, getting in and out of that stand location. But the way to cure that is to treat your food plots and aid that this time of the year with bait. Sugar beets, I'm not a huge carrot guy, but I mean, big bulky carrots, if you can get your hands on them, you know, they'll eat them this time of the year. Sugar beets, a lot of the other states other than Michigan, Wisconsin, you know, some of these states, you don't have the availability to get sugar beets and carrots like we do here in Michigan, but it's not legal here in Michigan. So any of those states that you are able to do that, what I recommend doing is looking at your restriction as far as how much I can use. If it's 2 gallons, if it's 2 yards, you know, whatever that restriction is, use the amount that you're able to do on a full amount. And that the reason that is that you can spread that over the entire food plot. Put your sugar beets out there, put your corn out there, whatever that requires in that area, and still treat that as your food plot. What I see happening is just like we talked before, though, I see the aid of bait coming in this time of the year, and because it's a powerful draw. But what happens is folks move this from their food plot areas, or they add it right in front of their blind because they're in that comfort setting, in that comfort stand. They're adding it right in front of their blinds, and even if that blind is in a transition area, it's not where you want the focus of the majority of the deer to end up at night. And that by moving that bait anywhere other than on a food plot, that's what you're doing, is you're pushing that daylight movement back and further and further. And this time of the year, guys, you don't have the days to make those mistakes. But it's a huge aid to use in the food plot. So what is do not here is do not accept a failed food plot. That's the number 2 thing. Do not accept a failed food plot in areas where you can legally add to those food plots. The big emphasis circled around there is food plots. Put it out in the food plots. Put it out in your destination. If you have a lease and you're in one of the areas, Kansas, Ohio, Arkansas, if you're in those areas and you're able to bait, and if it's just a lease, by all means use it, but use it in those food plots. Or if it's not a food plot, design or you designate an area that's your food plot. I don't care if it's got if it's in the middle of a red pine stand in Arkansas, and you don't have to clear it, but that can be your food focus spot. That's your food plot, and just set that spot aside. It doesn't have to be excavated out. It doesn't have to be cleared. It doesn't have to be tilled to be a food plot. It's a destination feed location. In areas in the states, guys, that you can use that, I highly recommend don't settling for a failed food plot, because it's a huge draw right now this time of the year. The third thing that we're going to chat here about is card pulls and exit plans. It's kind of 2 topics, but it all relates to one. Maybe the exit plan should have been a 4th here, but to me, card pulls. How do you know if you should be in that stand? You hear me talk about don't hunt the food plots. You hear me talk about not hunting unless it's right. I touched on the other day about when you go into the food plots. When you go in to hunt those food plots, if you think the weather's right and you got a weekend coming up, Today was a perfect example. Yesterday would have been a perfect example. That storm front's coming in. We had some weather, but we had all the weather hitting today. Now today is kind of a down day because the winds are nasty, 30-mile-an-hour winds. Tomorrow's going to be better. If you know that stuff is coming, what I recommend, this is how I recommend doing a card pull this time of the year. You don't go in there into them food plots unless you know that it's a last piece, it's a last card to play, to pull out. When you're shuffling cards, it's that last card that you pull out, and it's a Hail Mary. Talking about football, it's a Hail Mary at the end. You have to know though, if you pull that card and you play that card, or you throw that Hail Mary too soon this time of the year, if it's your last hunt at a lease, if it's your last hunt at the cabin for the year, then by all means pick the right time and throw that Hail Mary, get in there on that food plot, make it happen. Because it is a huge draw right now. But that's the reason that you've picked away all season, to be able to let those deer transition out to there, to have that capability, or have that entity available to you in the late season. And the fact of the matter is, guys, a lot of folks don't have that opportunity. When it gets to this time in the late season, we might as well not even talk about hunting the food plot, because there's no reason to hunt the food plot, because the deer are so nocturnal that they're not going to come out on it anyway. That's a huge success, a huge point to make. Looking back 90 days, you only got 2 weeks ahead of you. Look back 90 days, and do you still feel success? Can you still see success out on your food plot yet this year? If you know, hey, the cards are telling me that the cameras are telling me that he's going to be there, and I'm going to go out and I'm going to make this happen. But let that deer tell you that on those card pulls. So this is what I do. I go into the stand, wait for the right wind, and go in there. If you think that it's it's untouched, that the pressure's been off the food plot, the food is there, whether you've added that, you've added stuff to that to make that happen a couple of weeks ago when you were at the cabin, whatever the case is, or if your food plots are really strong, you're hunting an area where you bought a couple acres of standing corn, or 3, 4, 5 acres of standing beans, whatever the case is, from the farmer that you're leasing from, and all that is unpressured, and hey, there's a high percentage of a chance with this weather front coming in, it's my last couple of days to hunt, I'm going to go and I'm going to kill something out that food plot. It can be done. That is when you need to hunt food plots, not early season. But this is what I do, guys. I wait till the right wind. I make a plan. This is going to happen. Let's say you need a northwest wind, and it's a northwest wind. You go in there, you take the bow in, you take everything in, you walk into that area, you get to that area just as you would unpressured, making sure this time of the year those does are going to be bedded way closer to that food source than a lot of people realize. Earlier season, it's 80, 90, 100 yards if your habitat isn't correct right on the food source. Now they're tight. They're not going to venture very far, because it's energy that they're burning, especially in a state like Michigan where we get all this weather. So you got to be really, really cautious. But you go in there, you pull that card, and if the deer are on the cameras, if you're running these cameras on the food plots, you go in there and pull the card, and there is the buck that you're looking for. These are the things I look for. If the buck that you're looking for is there, then obviously you're going to stay in the stand and you're going to hunt. If there's a majority of the deer, the resident deer, the core deer that are on that, are using that food plot, but maybe it just wasn't him, but he's alive from other card pulls that you've had on the farm, or whatever the case is, or sightings, then I'm going to sit there. But if you pull the card and there's no daylight movement on that at all, and it's all nocturnal, if there's nothing on there, and you're at the cabin, or you're at the property, or you have another 2 weeks to hunt, you have availability to hunt right until the last day of the season, I then put my gloves back on, put my pack back on, and out of the stand I go, and I go find somewhere else to sit, or I don't hunt at all. And that's a hard pill to swallow. And because this time of the year, there's nothing more than any of us want than to punch that tag, right? But it's all geared on what you have left. A lot of channels are going to be out there. They're going to either tell you, yep, hunt that food source. Doesn't matter the wind or the location or what. That's food. You got to hunt. I'm not that guy. And but if you have to, that has to fit your schedule. If it's the last couple days and it's the last ditch effort that you have, by all means, sit there and enjoy it, and maybe use it as a thinking sit. You know, if you might get lucky. You know, there's still a chance. It's a game of unknowns, right? You might get lucky, but if your cards are telling you that it's the middle of the night pressure yet they're not using it, then obviously you're, you know, in the most times you're wasting your time. Better spent somewhere else. Come back, turn on the game, watch some college football, whatever the case is, or go sit somewhere else. Like I said, time well spent in other places. Exit plans, entrance and exit, but we're going to talk about exits too. At this time of the year, when you have that much snow on the ground and you start, these deer are bedded that close to your food source, whether, like I said, you've enhanced it, whether your food plots are still going strong, whether you got standing crops, whether you're hunting an area where they're all focused on public ground, that's off the beaten path, that nobody is pressuring right now, because all the hunters, especially on public ground, have you know, fallen off. So you might be the only one in a square section or a couple sections hunting. You have to know that your entrance and your exit is so important, because if you are going to, like we talked, go into those areas and you're going to hunt that that destination feed location, and it doesn't happen, that's one topic, and that's where the exit part of it comes in. If you know you're going to go in there and you have to get out of there, and it's not your last hunt, and you have some hunts yet coming down the road that you could possibly hunt, can you, without a doubt, not, I think I can get out of here, without a doubt, can you get out of that stand without crunching in the snow, and that snow crunch, this time of the year, it's like snapping limbs on the way in, sometimes it's so crunchy. Can you get in and out of that food source without blowing it? And if that's a, well, maybe, then that maybe's not going to cut it this time of the year, because their attention is so focused on so close to that food source this time of the year, that you have to be able to, one, like I said, either pray for really extreme weather to get that forgiveness from them, or the way I look at it is you just don't jump that hurdle until them last you know, ever so important hunts of the season.